this meeting to order. It's a special call meeting to discuss our school board budget. Oh, I thought you were ready. Okay, never mind. Take two. All right.
Okay, we're ready now.
All right. All right, I call this meeting to order. This meeting is a special call meeting to discuss the school board budget revisions for the fiscal year 23 school board budget. Ms. Tanner, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Campson?
Here.
Clanton?
Present.
Jordan?
Here.
Rousen?
Here.
Martin?
Present. And Dr. Gabriel will be joining us as well virtually, and Ms. Bassine is on her way. So let's go ahead and get started. On our agenda, we have Mr. Jenkins presenting the school year budget revisions.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Martin, Vice Chair Clanton, Dr. Birdsong, members of the board. You'll recall that you approved the fiscal 23 operating budget back in March. Since that time, City Council approved the city's budget and made appropriations to Norfolk Public Schools. That was done in May. The city appropriation was larger than your budget. And this is largely because of an unexpected increase in real estate tax assessments. In addition to that, the Budget Conference Committee of the General Assembly was unable, or the Joint Committee was unable to agree to a budget back in March. Agreement was finally reached in late May. Both houses of the Assembly approved that budget bill, and on June 21st, Governor Youngkin signed the bill with several amendments. I'll review the impact of the changes of state and local funds on our budget for the coming year, fiscal 23. So the first slide here is a summary of the changes in our funding that's available for fiscal 23. These are changes since March. There's a reduction in state revenue of $1,890,000.
Mr. Jenkins, I think that may be Dr. Gabriel calling in.
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Dr. Gabriel has previous to today requested to be able to attend this meeting from a remote location by electronic communication. And that requires for me to get several things on the record for the minutes and then for the board to hold a roll call vote to permit her to do so. So I'm going to ask a couple questions of Dr. Gabriel, make a statement, and then I will turn it over to the clerk to do the roll call vote. One requirement for you is that the board has to have a policy in place that would allow individual members to participate in a meeting remotely as long as there's a quorum of the board physically present in one physical location. And this board has such a policy. It's BDD. The other thing I have to establish for the record is that Dr. Gabriel's requesting this because of a personal matter, and the personal matter is that she had to work today and was unable to get to the board meeting in time, given she just got off work. The other thing that has to be just established is the remote location from which Dr. Gabriel is participating in the meeting. So, Dr. Gabriel, where are you?
I'm at my office in my...
Here in the city of Norfolk?
No, I'm in Suffolk.
I'm sorry?
I'm in Suffolk.
All right, so you're participating from your office in the city of Suffolk, Virginia.
Yes.
All right, and I'm correct, right, that the reasons for the personal matter was essentially because of your work today. You were scheduled to work and had a conflict.
That is correct. Yes, I just finished my clinic, and I'm also on call today, so I have to be here to take care of any kind of emergency situations that come up until 5 p.m. And then overnight. So that is the reason why I am joining in by phone.
All right. With that, I'm going to turn this over to the clerk to call the roll for a vote. And the vote is to permit Dr. Gabriel to participate in today's meeting from a remote location by electronic communication. If somebody can make the motion to allow her to so participate and second it.
Can I get a motion to allow Dr. Gabriel to participate in this meeting?
Madam Chair, I move that we allow Dr. Gabriel to participate in this meeting remotely.
Get a second?
Second.
Mr. Jordan, thank you.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, great.
We can proceed.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you. Let's just start over with slide 2. Okay, so there's been a reduction in Commonwealth funding of about $1,890,000. The largest part of this reduction, or actually the only part that's reducing, is the funding for at-risk and early reading programs. There were actually increases in state funding for basic aid and sales taxes. The sales taxes are based on updated revenue or updated projections of income of sales taxes. Excuse me. There's also increased funding from the City of Norfolk of $5.9 million. There is an addition for the fund balance reversion. This is based on your request of council to appropriate part of the reversion funds to the general fund. This initially was to be used for a contingency account. Finally, there's an increase in the grant budget for the American Recovery Plan Act, and this is to fund a $1,000 bonus for all positions within the state standards of quality. So the total changes on the revenue side are $9,290,000. On the spending side, we're recommending equivalent changes. First, we're recommending a bonus to all eligible employees in recognition for their dedication during the pandemic. We recommend the payment before the winter holidays using the same procedures we used in April. $2.72 million is funded from the state's ARPA grant. The remainder would come from our general fund. Employees will net $646 after taxes. So it's a $1,000 bonus before taxes, and employees are responsible for those taxes. We recommend increasing bus driver pay to meet market conditions and to ensure we're able to successfully recruit new drivers. We also recommend increasing the budget to address rapidly rising building and renovation costs, and have included $1,750,000 for that. The compression pay adjustment, which was authorized by the school board as part of it, was based on our preliminary estimates, and that was included in the budget of $2 million. We are recommending increasing that by $360,000 to address the actual cost. Since real estate assessments and related taxes are scheduled to increase, the 2-cent tax dedication to school construction and debt service is also increased. We need to increase the provision for debt service, as these funds will be held by the city to pay bondholders. Finally, we recommend an increase in the pay for substitute teachers. During the pandemic, substitute pay has not kept pace with rapidly growing wages, and we're having difficulty recruiting substitutes. After these changes, this slide presents what our budget would look like. You will see that the state revenue is projected at $226.57 million. This is a decline of $1.89 million compared to the proposed budget. City revenue increases by $5.9 million to $144.79 million. We'll also utilize a portion of the fiscal '21 reversion for current operations. These funds are utilized for one-time purposes, including a portion of it being used for the employee bonus and some for deferred maintenance. With these changes, the total revenues and resources available for the school general fund is now $383.29 million. On the spending side, we have similar, oops, I've gone too far, beg your pardon. Spending side, we have a similar situation. The impact of increased resources is reflected here in the general fund spending plan for fiscal '23. Total spending climbs from $376.72 million to $383.29. As noted in the earlier slide, practically all of the funds will be used for staff compensation and deferred maintenance on school facilities. This is the operating budget by fund. It shows the school board proposal and the changes. As noted already, the general fund increases by $6.57 million to $383.29 million. No changes are made in the school nutrition budget. That remains at $23 million. The grant budget is increased by $2.72 million with the addition of ARPA funds that were approved by the General Assembly. The total operating budget across all funds is revised to $453.5 million. That really concludes my comments on the budget amendments. We were also asked to provide some information about the compression summary. This slide indicates what our original estimates were for each year, and we also have a revised 3-year plan showing a slightly different amount. Primarily, the amount gets smaller as the faster we actually implement. So it's approximately $14 million under the original estimate and just a little under $14 million in the revised estimate. With that, our Chief Human Resources Officer will discuss the specifics of our compression plan. Thank you.
Go ahead.
School Board Chair Martin, Vice Chair, Mr. Clanton, school board members, good afternoon. As Mr. Jenkins referenced, I'll be covering for you now the information regarding the compression study. This first slide right here, slide 8, is the original compression proposal. So we just want to review that. What this slide was a summary of the 4-year decompression plan that was proposed at the June 1, 2022 meeting. As a reminder, the pay team identified the following years that the employees did not receive a step increase. So for review, from 2009-2010 all the way through 2011-12, the salaries and steps were frozen within the school division. Then in 2013-14 through 2016-17, steps were also frozen, but a 2% COLA increase was given to the employees. The school division did take some corrective action to rectify those step freezes. Specifically, in the 2012-2013 school year, the salary freezing that had occurred from 2010 through 2011-2012 was retroactively addressed through the following actions. Employees that were hired in 2009 and earlier received a 3-step increase. Employees hired on step 1 in 2010-2011 received a 2-step increase. And employees hired on step 1 in 2011-2012 received a 1-step increase. While corrective action was taken to address those previous freezes, it is of note that employees did not receive a 1-step increase in addition to the corrective action. That decision resulted in another year of no-step movement. Though employees received COLA increases from 2013-14 through 2016-17, no action has been taken to address the lack of step movement for those years. The plan addressed the individual employees who have been directly affected by the lack of step movement for 13-14 through 16-17 and the resulting compression. Employees hired after January 31, 2016 were not affected by this lack of step movement and would not receive an additional salary adjustment. The timeline for the plan addressed the longest-serving employees first. Less senior employees were proposed to be addressed in subsequent years. The staggered implementation was suggested due to the cost of the implementation. So, from review, that's what was presented on June 1, 2022. The next slide you see is the amended compression proposal. In response to the board's request that the team revisit the plan to reduce the time required to fully address the compression, the team proposes a modified 3-year implementation plan, as opposed to the 4-year implementation plan that was presented. This is the equivalent to a 25% reduction in the timeline implementation. So if we went to 3 years, we're reducing the implementation 25%. What does this look like for us? Employees hired before February 1, 2012 will receive an 8-step adjustment, 2 steps in 22-23, 3 steps in 23-24, and 3 steps in 24-25. Employees hired February 1, 2012 through January 31, 2013 would receive a 7-step adjustment, 2 steps in 22-23, 3 steps in 23-24, and 2 steps in 24-25. Employees hired February 1, 2013 through January 31, 2014 would receive a 6-step adjustment, 1 step in 22-23, 3 steps in 23-24, and 2 steps in 24-25. Employees hired February 1, 2014 through January 31, 2015 would receive a 5-step adjustment, 1 step in 22-23, 2 steps in 23-24, and 2 steps in 24-25. Lastly, employees hired February 1, 2015 through January 31, 2016 would receive a 4-step adjustment, 1 step in 22-23, 2 steps in 23-24, and 1 step in 24-25. As a reminder, as authorized, the first year of the 3-year plan has already been implemented. Eligible employees saw these changes in their contracts for the 22-23 school year. So this is the markup version of what that would look like. The next slide represents a clean copy of what I just stated, removing the 4th year since we are proposing going to a 3-year implementation. This is the clean, non-red line version of the information from the previous slide. Thus, it only includes the 3-year plan implementation. And that is the recommendation.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Any questions from the board?
I have one. First of all, thank you for working so hard to get that 4th year pressed down, because I know all members of the board were anxious to hurry this up for all of our teachers who have waited so long for compensation. So thank you for getting that done.
Certainly.
The question that I have is not in that part. It's at the beginning, when we're looking at the increased funding available. Am I misunderstanding when it says reduce funding for at-risk and early reading programs? Are they getting more money, or is it being reduced? And if it's being reduced, why that population?
Ms. Campson, it's actually a reduction in state funding.
That's what
That's based on General Assembly action and ratified by the governor.
Oh, so we didn't have a choice how that money went?
Not at all.
Okay, and I don't see what the reduction was written next. I guess we just put in what the increases were. Do you know how much money we lost?
I
Or
can get
never
that
mind,
for you. I
how
don't
much
have
money
it,
the children lost?
But it was a couple of $1 million. It wasn't, it was the largest negative, I mean, it was only significant negative, and it was very large.
So they're sitting there looking at this and they're thinking, what can we reduce? And they automatically go to our low kids?
Okay, let me explain how that's working. The governor, Governor Northam, had recommended about, I think he'd almost doubled the amount of money going into at-risk funds. The General Assembly broke that down to about a 50% increase. So there's a substantial increase in at-risk funding above fiscal '22, but it's smaller than the governor had recommended for '23.
All right, so they didn't lose anything. What the
When you
reduction
look-
was reduction from the original,
From the original budget.
which would not, okay.
So there's actually
they're still
an
making more money for the
Right,
kids.
there's actually an increase compared to the previous year. It's simply not as high as Governor Northam had recommended.
All right, I'm still upset because of the mindset of whoever's making these decisions to look at that and go, oh, at-risk and early reading programs, that's a good place to cut. Okay, but thank you for clarifying it for me, because I have, as you can see, I made a big star next to it because I was so unhappy when I saw it. Thank you very much.
But we're not making any negative adjustments to those types of funds
Okay.
or programs.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you for bringing this back here. As you stated before, the sentiment that left out of the board was about, particularly with compression, making that sooner and then being able to address it. I guess the question would be, we're at 3 years, this is the presentation here. What were some of the limitations as to why we couldn't go further, make it sooner?
Well, there are several reasons why we have not recommended a faster timeline. One, we were concerned about sustainability going forward. The one-time bonus that's recommended would not have any impact on future budgets. Also, the board had authorized us to proceed with the first phase of what became a 4-year plan. The other thing is there are employee expectations, because it's been pretty broadly disseminated that there's a bonus within the state budget. So there's an expectation of our employees for that bonus.
Mr. Jenkins, one question. When you say the budget, the bonus from the state, is that for every employee that bonus is funding out of state funds?
The state funding only covers those employees who are within standards of quality.
Mm-hmm.
We, of course, have more employees than are covered by SOQ, so we will receive $2.72 million, which will cover about half of our, I think it's about half of our staff. It won't cover everyone. The balance of the funds would have to come from the city revenue and the contingency account that you had requested in March.
And I think you kind of answered that on the bonus piece there. I did see here, I think I calculated almost a $6 increase in the salary for our school bus drivers. Moving from their current
believe
pay,
you-
$15.30 an hour, and we're going to move to $21.64.
That is correct compared to what it is currently.
Okay. And how does that rank within our surrounding school divisions?
We will, from the information we have available, we appear to be among the leaders, or at the leading spot.
That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Birdsong.
And just to clarify, I know there perhaps were some concerns about the contingency that we requested earlier and was approved by the board. And that was one of the reasons we requested that contingency. and if approved by the board, that contingency fund, which was referred to as the superintendent's contingency fund, will be used to support the bonuses for employees,
Okay.
just to be clear.
Okay. Any other question? I'm sorry, I already have the list here. Ms. Basine, go ahead.
So, so if I can piggyback off of what was just shared. So the ARPA funds for the $1,000 bonuses, the 2.7 million, that is for the SOQ funded positions, correct?
That is correct.
And then we're adding, if I understood Dr. Birdsong's statement, that 2.56 million is also going toward the bonuses.
Right.
So, and then on the next slide,
If I can
Oh.
interrupt, if you
Okay.
add those two together, you come up with slightly more than the 5.09 million. So much of it does, but we are having 2.72 from the state plus 2.556. It's a little over 5 million. But most of it does go to that, yes.
okay, most of it goes to the, and to the
employee
employees, but
bonuses.
just the SOQ funded positions or the beyond, because we obviously have positions beyond.
Absolutely.
So it includes beyond
Right.
the SOQ. What's the,
It's covering all positions that are not covered by SOQ.
okay,
The state is covering the SOQ entirely, but none of the non-SOQ funding.
okay. And the non-SOQ employees are being covered by this 2.56 million.
Right, which originated from the 2021 reversion. You didn't
Okay.
hear 19.
Okay. And then, so then on the next slide, so then you're saying that adds up to the 5.09 million. That's where you're getting that from, right?
Correct.
Adding those two
Correct.
pieces, okay. All right. And those, so I was trying to get an understanding of the employee categories, and I believe that the bonuses are going to those same, I understand the SOQ positions, but as we had last year, we had several employee groups, kind of come back and advocate for the bonuses. Does it include what we finally, the
Absolutely.
final group?
Final grouping
That
that
we-
the board agreed upon.
Okay.
Yes, that is the same group that would be eligible.
Okay, all right. And so next, now I'm moving into the compression piece. So I too, as you all know, wanted to move more aggressively on correcting the compression issues that we've had. And so, I firmly believe, well, first let me back up a second. Can you share, as of today, what our vacancies look like? Do you have a sense of what that looks like?
No, I don't have that information with me. I wasn't prepared to present information about vacancies today.
Okay. And as we know, having a teacher in front of students is vital to the education system. And I think what I heard from the board at the last meeting, the work session that we had, was that there seemed to be energy and collaboration and understanding that, and support for being more aggressive with this, being that this is a vital resource. When you say that there are concerns around sustainability, I'd like to better understand what the costs would be for next year. So tell me why if we as a board are committed to providing that resource and providing the funds for that, why it would then become an issue of sustainability. If we are committing that is a budget priority.
We won't have enough money in order to provide the bonuses that were included in the state budget and do more compression than we've already recommended. We have recommended a revised 3-year plan which nearly triples the cost in fiscal 2024 and more than doubles the cost in 2025. But there's simply not enough money in the current, our fiscal 23 budget to go any further. It's already been done as far as compression is concerned without reducing something else.
Okay. And so, and this may be a naive question, but so the money for the bonuses has to be used for the bonuses. So that 5.09 million could not be applied toward any compensation, or it could not be applied to correcting the compression. Is that correct?
There's a provision in the act which allows you to provide something equivalent to the bonus, which falls back to employee expectations. So we felt like we needed to honor the intent of the governor and the General Assembly's budget.
Okay.
Can I just
So
real quick, real quick, I'm gonna, just for,
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
you're hard to hear, but also, just so we don't get confused moving forward, we had compression, now can we call it decompression? Can we do that? Or is that not a word, is not apply here?
We are
Okay, because we're
decompressing.
using the word compression, meaning not just the issue, but also the resolution to the issue, so I just want to make sure that,
Right, but for addressing the
Yeah, before we
issues
go
of
any further and get
compression,
very
you're
confused.
by and large
So anything-
decompressing.
the use in the,
Yeah.
moving forward is an effort to decompress. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
So
Go ahead.
if I can go,
I just wanna make-
I lost my train of thought. So what was this? Oh, so the use of the funds for the bonuses could not be used for this. So I guess I'm not hearing a clear no, that it absolutely could not be used in that toward decompressing?
I can't tell you that it's absolutely not. There
Okay.
is language which permits you to provide equivalent compensation to employees.
Right.
And to meet the expectations, we believe that the bonus is where we should, and that's what, we're recommending that because we believe that's where the expectations are. We were reticent to put it into, towards the compression because there would be additional cost in the second year, fiscal 24.
Okay. And so going back to when we approved the previous set of bonuses that were distributed on April 8th, I think before spring break. So that money came from the unspent funds, correct?
Largely vacancy savings. Well, let me just say, entirely vacancy savings.
Entirely?
Yes.
So, and if I recall correctly, there was roughly 20 million there,
Correct.
and we applied about 11 million towards those bonuses
That
at
is
that
correct.
time. So at this moment, what is the balance that we have remaining?
Well, on July 1st, it's like resetting the clock. So I will tell you that when we put the budget together, we do contemplate that there will be vacancy savings. So if we were to hire every single position on the start of the year and they stayed with us for the entire year, we would have a $6 million hole in our budget.
Mhm.
So we have already anticipated that there will be some savings.
Okay.
If the vacancies are as they have been last year, their savings would be more than $6 million. But standing here today on June 30th, I can't tell you that.
So just to tell you what my thinking is with the board is if there were funds remaining, to see if we could apply that towards our decompression effort.
We identified the $20 million surplus in January
Right.
of this past year.
Mhm.
After a fair part of the year had passed and we were comfortable with the employment trend, and we had some data to support it.
Right.
I'm not very comfortable doing that before the year has started. As I said, we have $6 million that's already baked into the budget that we have to have. We have to have vacancies worth $6 million. Otherwise, we would overspend their budget and would have to make other adjustments. And I would say I'm comfortable with that because it's impossible to fill all positions for the entire year. There are people coming and going all the time.
All right. I will let others, if they have questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Jordan.
I'll come back. You can come back to me.
I'd like to echo what's already been said in terms of trying to meet some of the feedback that you heard from the board overall, and particularly around the deal with the compression piece. I'd like to just put something in the parking lot for now for the board to consider. As I was going back and looking at the board's priority around attract and retain highly qualified and effective staff, and some of the things that we've talked about thus far. One time we had a stipend for hard to staff schools. And just in some of the school visits that I've done and looking at the HR reports that we've received over the year, which are very good reports, I'd like for us to maybe consider having a placeholder for putting some resources into a hard to staff school stipend. And part of my thought is, we had the goal of wanting to try to have fully staffed schools at the beginning of the year. I know Ms. Campson was very instrumental in helping us craft that language. And as I look at some of the vacancies that we're seeing at some schools, some are in pathways. What I mean, feeder patterns. I may call them pathways, but feeder patterns, meaning that some of our elementary schools that have vacancies in core areas, math, science, English, are feeding into middle schools that have some of the same challenges and then feeding into high school. So it's possible that some of our students, which happen to be in some of our most economically challenged schools, could be finding themselves not having this highly qualified, effective person in front of them for some time. I know some of us saw an email that came through in one example of a parent. So I think we should look at that as part of this if we can find the resources to do it, at least at some level. So I wanted to put that out there first. Second, I'm still a little confused about the fund. So are we saying that we no longer have the contingency fund, or we still have it but we're just funding it differently? I'm not sure I'm following.
Okay, I'll try to help you there. The contingency fund, or the contingency amount, was not included in the fiscal 23 budget. You did pass a resolution back in March asking the City Council to add that to the fiscal 23 budget. So you'll see on the revenue, we're under source of funds an increase of $2,556,000, and that is actually coming from our fund balance or the reversion from fiscal 21. You had requested that that be put into a contingency. Dr. Birdsong, as we've consulted with her, has indicated she wanted to use those funds for specific purposes that we've laid out, rather than leaving them on a line called contingency. So the recommendation is to use those funds, by and large, for the $1,000 bonus, which nets to $646 that the General Assembly has approved.
Okay, so thank you for that. So I think part of So I know the recommendation came for the original contingency fund, and I know that the board submitted the proposal and the resolution to the council for the contingency fund. We haven't finalized that yet. So to me, it's a little awkward for me trying to follow, because when the contingency fund came up, it wasn't defined. It just said at the superintendent's discretion.
Correct.
And one of the concerns I had about it is I was looking at, as some others who have contingency funds, I was finding where they had certain policies around it. So really it was the board would establish a contingency fund and a reserve. I think in Virginia Beach, if you want to access it, it takes a majority or supermajority of the board in order to utilize it. So what we're really saying here, we're taking one-time funds, and the recommendation now is to use 2.56 million of the one-time funds to support the bonus. Am I saying that correctly?
That is correct.
Okay. And then going back to Ms. Bassine's question earlier, by the recommendation that came forward and the board approving a bonus already, weren't we in essence ahead of the game in terms of issuing a bonus for the thank you and the hard work that was done?
Except it was in a different fiscal year. The bonus that was approved by the General Assembly was for compensation paid after July 1st of 2023.
Right. So to me, those that went through the pandemic, if I understand the intent is to reward those that went through the pandemic, would be our current employees that we had at the time when we issued the bonus already. The December timeframe could include individuals who weren't even here. Is that correct? If based upon the current, if we were to take that approach,
it would include people that are hired starting July 1st. Yes.
Okay. And
I mean, I would remind you that we are still in the pandemic.
Oh no! Believe me, I only took off my mask so you could hear me clearly.
Yeah, thank you.
But what I was trying to get an understanding of what the General Assembly had in mind, and what I think, frankly, Norfolk was ahead of the curve, and I appreciate Norfolk doing that and the recommendation that you all brought. But if it can be leveraged in other ways, you had mentioned earlier about the expectations. So can you clarify that a little bit? What you're saying, because it's been out in the from the governor's actions that it's out there. Are you saying that we've told employees already that they're going to get a $1,000
No,
bonus?
I don't believe we've communicated. I'm fairly certain we haven't, but it is in the state budget document. So our thoughts are there will be expectations for a bonus because it's in the state budget.
All right. But if
And the state is sending us money specifically for that.
But I think it's also would be fair to say that the issue of competitive compensation and dealing with compression and those types of issues have been long-standing. Hopes, I won't say expectations, but at least hopes that we would be able to address that. Is that fair to say?
I
You don't have to answer that. I think so from what I've heard. I want to try to, as you all know, I'm still struggling with trying to understand the end result of the current compression recommendation. So just for my benefit, I just want to make sure that you all know the same thing I'm talking about. So I just made a copy of some charts. Should be enough, I think. There's not enough to go around. Dr. Rouse.
Okay, now I need my glasses.
So, going back to the original Siegel Water study, and we were looking at trying to do a couple of things. One was the market competitiveness, how Norfolk is competing in the region and with like schools, like school divisions, and then also dealing with the internal pay equity. So in the recommendation that we received and that we're discussing, it's broken down by tenure, how long you've been employed. Did you all do a breakdown by classification so that we would know the impact of this on teachers or principals or classified employees? Is there a breakdown that if we implemented all of this, what we would look like as a division in terms of distribution in whatever year it is, 4 years out from now, versus where we were and where we may be now?
We did one for the year for when it was 4 years, but I don't have it with me for the 3 years, and I can easily get that and send that out to everyone.
Was the 4 year in the PowerPoint?
It was in no, I had that information over on June 1, but it wasn't on a PowerPoint.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to vote tonight, it would be helpful. That's part of in the email I was trying to send to you. I was trying to get an understanding of some sense of where we were, where we are, and then as we implement this, what the impact is. And one of the reasons for that, so if you look on the presentation, again, this is from 2016, you can see when it was dealing with the teachers' distribution by lane and step. At that time, it was estimated that 64% of teachers are in the first 9 steps of the pay scale. And if you look at what I have numbered here is number 3, it shows here that the distribution of current teachers was all over. And so the finding at that time was there's very little correlation between years of service and pay step. So one of the reasons that you caught my attention with your previous presentation and talking about where we were in terms of a policy, on slide 6, what Siegel Waters did in terms of trying to help Norfolk determine how competitive we were in terms of initial placement policy. At that time, you can see where some other school divisions were then. I have no idea where they are now. But I'm still struggling to kind of figure out where is Norfolk in the description that you've given us thus far. On something like this, how would you describe what Norfolk's current placement policy is, and then how would what you're proposing, how would that impact it?
Well, our current placement policy is we have an operation document that we use. It is not a one-for-one as we've previously stated. And this operation document is used one time when a person is initially hired into the school division. And then after that, because that person is now an employee, that document for them is never used again because it was used in order to place them appropriately on their correct step based on this operation document that Norfolk Public Schools uses, which is not a one-for-one. Ultimately, that would be a great goal, and it can change. It moves perhaps each year, possibly. We have all the operation documents historically to show if a person came in here in say 2009, 2010, we have that operation document as well as all the way up. So we have them. So that's how a person is actually placed. We need that. The operation document itself is not a scale. If you look at the operation document, and I know that there are some out there that have been seen, it's not really a document that we put on our website or anything, because it's really only relevant to the individuals who we are hiring in that particular year. So that's the real purpose of that, is for placement. It has no salary dollars on there, so you'll notice it doesn't relate to salary, but it relates in that it gives us where to put the person on our salary and wages table. So that's how that is used for us. And right now, the current one that we are using, for 21, 20, for 20, the current one that we have, right now, the current one that we have, a person from a step 1 all the way up to a step 6 is considered 1-to-1. But then at step 6, a person who has 6 years of teaching experience and 7 years of teaching experience are both on step 6. A person who has 8, 9 years of experience, they're on step 7. So this is where it is, and this is, it's changed somewhat over the years, and we have all of them. It's just that it could be potentially very confusing to put all of these out on the website, because they're not relevant to anyone unless this is your first year, being hired.
I'm not advocating for the website. What I'm trying to, so like on slide 4 and throughout the original presentation, where it describes that employees are in a pay step lower than expected. When that was being done, wasn't that lower than expected based upon the number of years they had in education versus where they actually were in terms of what number of years they had of service versus where they were in Norfolk Public Schools on the pay step? So when the estimates were being made about 24.5 million, or when we look at these different charts, the language that says lower than expected, wasn't the expected really being based upon the idea of 1 year of service or a year of service for each step?
Without doing further research and looking back on this at this point, seeing this again at this point, it's been 6 years now. I would need to go back and do additional research with that study before I would be able to comment completely on that.
Okay. So then, with the current proposal, what do we end up with? Maybe let me ask it.
Are you saying that that the ultimate goal would be to get to a 1-to-1
Right. So
scale, and so right now we aren't there yet? But if that is the goal, how much would your recommendation get us closer to that goal?
right.
Is that what you're asking?
That's part of what I'm trying to understand, because
Are you able to answer that question?
Well, what I can say is that in the approach that we are taking is we're trying to, as we stated, decompress the employees who have been most compressed. And those who've been most compressed are those who were hired here prior to 2012. So the goal is we were able to look at the years in which steps were not given and now fix that, get them on that step based on that information. And then certainly, yes, that's going to get us closer, because those individuals are those who have been most compressed. Individuals whom we've hired since, I think, 2016-17 school year, they're going to be where they are because they came in brand new, they got placed, and they've moved along ever since. So they can experience those years in which our tenured employees prior to 2012 actually experienced. So it's definitely going to get them closer. And once we see that, then perhaps we can look at something different maybe.
But right now, you can't really qualify it or quantify it right now.
No, I can't,
Okay.
no.
And so one other question I had on that.
Well, based on this, still the same question though. So the 3-year plan will be checked each year. We'll have new information to reassess where we are and how we move forward.
Certainly, because what will happen is we're doing the first year now, then if this plan is authorized by you all, then what's going to happen is just naturally, some people are going to retire. They're not going to stay, so they're going to retire or leave. And so the numbers can only go down. They're not going to go up based on this plan right now. But we certainly would be able to see, bring our data back to say, this is where we are right now based on the number of employees who qualify for these actions based on their hire date. And that's why we went with this, is because the hire date was the most fair way to be able to assess how to move through this through this study.
Well, the reason I was trying to have been asking and encouraging that we plot the information is so we could have some sense of apples to apples of, where we are, what our target is, what our absolute target is. So what concerns me still, and I'll just ask you if you can explain it one more time for me. If the board approved a 30-step scale and you have a 20 or 22 step, something other than that on the operational document. So if you are a new employee, your determination of where you're being placed on the 30-step scale is based upon I can't remember what it was, 22 or 24?
Your verifiable years of service.
Right. So what's the difficulty with, if the board approved a 30-step scale, of just having a 30-step scale that everyone is placed on versus, because I'm nowhere in your league in terms of this expertise, but I'm trying to understand, because it comes across to me like we are creating compression, like we have now we have and maybe we always have had, but what has come to light is it's almost like we have a dual system. So we have one system for existing employees, one system for new employees, and then even the new employees, when they are hired based upon your internal document, doesn't seem to me to align with what the board approved as far as the 30-step scale. So it just seems like we are causing a new compression for new employees, I think out of a good will gesture of trying to say that we didn't want to, quote, reward the new employee over the existing employee because we've had the existing employee compressed. But why wouldn't we just have the 30-step scale, decompress the existing employees, and place the new employees on the scale where they belong?
Okay. That's a lot, but I'll try.
What I'm hearing is because cost of living goes up as time goes on, right? So that the new employees come in at a higher level with less years of experience than.
No, we don't necessarily know.
What you're saying?
No, because we could hire, somebody could be brand new, somebody could be 20 years. We see on the personnel docket that sometimes we hire people that have so many years of service, may not have been in Norfolk, but they could be a 20-year veteran, and we hire them in Norfolk. But if they're a 20-year veteran, let's say, and they're a teacher, if I'm understanding correctly, we may not necessarily put that person at step 20. We'll put that person on whatever this how the internal process works. Because think I'm getting a better understanding of it, because we're saying that somebody who's been in the school division for 20 years may not be on step 20. So because because an existing 20-year employee may not be on step 20, we're going to say to the new employee, and I'm making this up, we're going to put you on step 17 because somebody else wasn't on step 20. What I'm trying to get us to quantify so the board really knows how much money we need to accomplish some of this is, what does it take to get to the extent that we can, because I know we can't go back forever. I do get that point. But to the extent that we can, get the existing employees correct and have the new employees placed in a position that is aligned with that versus having the existing employees still be compressed and bringing in new employees and potentially compressing them too, against the idea of what step they should be on based upon their years of service. And I'm worried about it because one of the issues that is very much on point is when we first looked at the study and started doing the first two phase-ins, and it was multiple things that were being done, was we knew we didn't have the resources. Right now, Norfolk in particular, and I think most school divisions, have this small window of opportunity with what we have, the ARPA funds, the ESSER funds, and all the other funds that are available, the city's revenue being up. I think we have an opportunity to have a greater impact on employee compensation, which then can help us drive our goal around attracting and retaining and having fully staffed schools. My fear is if we delay it, we don't know what the economy is going to be. Congress has changed. We've been warned many times. We've got this little tranche of funds right now. We better use it and use it well. We may not see this opportunity for who knows how long. And so I just want to be, as a board member, to really have an understanding of what we can really do to address our goal and priority around compensation in this window of time. And right now, because at least for me, because I just can't place apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and I'm trying to help tease out where we are. Especially the charts, I think, are helpful, at least for me, in that regard.
Mr. Billups.
Couple of things. First of all, I think we're speaking this slide presentation that you gave us. This is representative from the Siegel Waters, and that study was to, as you said, look at and quantify market competitiveness and internal equity, whereas the study with MAG was a study that was specifically focused on compression. So two different consultants. Siegel Waters used the graphics and all of that to represent what they wanted to present. So that's why you see all these graphical representations. MAG did not do that. If it was the will of the board for us to produce some types of graphical representations of some type of data, then I would need to know that and then take that back to my team, and then we work on charts or graphs or whatever that would help make it clearer as to where people were. But I would need someone to direct me to do that. And again, MAG did not do that because it's not part of their decision in how they conducted the study.
And that was part of my initial concern around how I think we can do a better job of communicating, because to me, we had the existing study and we had done two phases. And then during budget discussion time, when I was asking how are we progressing towards our phase-in, what came about for me was, well, we aren't really sure, we need to go back and study it again. So the expectation that I thought the board had was not just to do a study around compression, but how to update where we were with the existing goal that the board had around competitiveness. And that's why I've been asking those questions, because otherwise, I think it's great that we are doing addressing compression, but ultimately addressing compression is a piece of Norfolk, at least I think what I've heard from board colleagues, Norfolk being the most competitive school division, at least in our region, as relates to compensation. And so if we don't have the information that we need in order to determine whether or not we are progressing in that regard, it just makes it hard for the board to really understand, at least I think, to really understand what's the end result of our action. And so I don't want the board to have to be in a position of having to define what charts and those types of things. I think as the administration, you all should help us to be able to see how we are progressing towards the goals and targets that we've set in the accountability plan or with any type of presentation. So I do think that maybe we'll end up with a budget revision in a month, but I do think it is important that we're lay people. So if graphical presentations and charts and data are helpful, I think, to most boards. And one of the reasons I could follow the Siegel Water study because they plotted it, and I think I sent to a few of you on the administration side, the same firm that did the compression, I think it was in my second or third year on the board, they did a study and they also did competitiveness, but because they did not include teachers in their recommendations, the board, said we won't do that, and eventually we got to the Siegel Waters work. But I do think it's important that we know whether or not we are progressing towards our goal.
Wouldn't that be the intention? I'm not understanding how we're not progressing toward our goal.
I'm not saying that
isn't
we're
the
not.
intention of the recommendation? Can you defend that?
Yes, I would say that those are our efforts. That's why we recommended what we recommended and why we recommended what we have, is in order to demonstrate efforts, recognizing the compression and demonstrating efforts towards fixing it. So that's why we have here what we have.
Mr. Clinton, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to get some clarity. I think Mr. Jordan brought up some good points. I just want to clarify on some of that. So the assumption, I think, was being made that based on, well, I'm glad you clarified this with Mr. Jordan, that the reference point is that this is from 2016, that based on this, individuals were automatically below where they should have been, rather than, and that they were being frozen out. That there was some thought that either they weren't, based on their years of service or whatever else, that they were not on their steps, rather than just being frozen. And so I wanted to kind of clarify that, because that kind of sounded like this 2016 was saying that they weren't even on the regular steps because we weren't doing something right, rather than this actually being attributed to being frozen.
Again, not exactly, and again, I really would need to, this is 6 years old,
Yeah.
that study. I would really need to review that before I could honestly give an informed answer to that question right now.
Okay. You also, I heard about retirements, and you said that with individuals retiring, that there would be a natural
Attrition.
that would happen in that. I know we heard this about retirements and things like that, and I know we have a 3-year plan here. Is there anything being done to push people out? In other words, if they wanted to stay here 3 years additional.
We want us to say.
I just,
Yeah.
my other thing of that is I know that based on retirement and so forth is that your 3 top years, that's how that those numbers are made. So that's an important thing.
Right. So also this has an underlying, basically, a component there that hopefully some other people, they won't leave. They'll recognize that I can stay, and if they see that, hey, I'm going to get these additional steps, I'll stay.
Definitely. The other thing is when I look at this, and particularly slide 6 on what Mr. Jordan supplied to us, I just want to zero in on Chesapeake. At this time, it was stating, as this was 2016, and this is a comparison of competitiveness, that Chesapeake is a 1-to-1. I think that we've heard several times from individuals who've come to this podium to talk about a 10% increase. Now, I had the fortunate opportunity of serving on the governor's school and the CSEP board, and so I had an opportunity with Dr. Cotton in Chesapeake, and I asked him flat out, I'm like, why are you doing this 10%? You know, we're getting people saying we need to do 10%, and he frankly just told me, he said, Carlos, we were so far behind, we were number 7 in start pay. We had to make this large increase so that we can remain competitive. So I'm looking here at 2016 talking about competitiveness and seeing that they were 1-to-1, and then we're now here in 2022, and they're having to do the same thing. So it's been almost 6 years, and to be perfectly honest, all the school divisions are moving around. Here it is today, we've got a proposal in front of us to increase our school bus drivers by $6, which will put us in one of the top areas there.
Keep us in the top.
And keep us in the top. We're always moving. The competitiveness is there.
Yes.
Like Ms. Basine had said, I too want to try to figure out how we can do this quick. How can we move individuals? I was here when and experienced the compression and everything else, just like everyone else that was going on. But my thing is that I think what I heard from Mr. Jenkins is about making sure that we may see there's some extra dollars there, but we don't know the climate. We've heard on the news that that the feds are doing all these different things with rates and so forth, and there's discussion about the potential that we could be in a recession. There's a lot of different things out there, but I think that from the finance, you're being very cautious to say what we have, and you've gone back and you've brought us a plan that at least moves us up by an entire year off. And I think that it's really closed out some things. We got rid of some people talked about the superintendent's contingency fund because we didn't know what was going to happen in the fall. But I think that from what I'm gathering in, this is something. And I think that at the end, if I've heard correctly, that those individuals who've come in, I guess, was it 2016 or 2017 after that, new employees were being placed on the 1-to-1?
Right, because they would have come in where they came, and because they didn't experience any compression here with Norfolk Public Schools, they're not owed any of these compression steps. So that group of individuals we wouldn't even be looking at them because we can clearly show them where they were. That's why, again, the focus was who's been most compressed to the school division. Right. And that's how, and lost those steps during those years and still stayed with Norfolk Public Schools during that time.
That's an important piece that I want to kind of bring out there because I think we've received some emails as board members for individuals. I mean, I think we've heard it before. Folks were like, well, I'll leave Norfolk, go somewhere else for a year, come back to Norfolk to kind of, I guess, circle around what we had as a system there to get their additional dollars and get on what they were perceived now their 1-to-1 and their right step.
Right.
Now there's concern that, well, wait a minute, they're getting all these extra steps down here. I believe that I should have more money, but it's because you separate it from this division.
A break in service.
And
we specifically wanted to be clear about that because it wouldn't be fair to determine, because your break of service was for this reason and yours was for this reason, we're going to give it to you, but we're not going to give it to the other person. So the bottom line is this methodology was to those individuals who had experienced what we say they experienced, but in spite of, they still remained dedicated to the school division. Hence why they're the ones we're proposing to receive.
And my last item in here, I wanted to, because if someone's been with us, Mr. Jordan used this analogy, someone has been with us for 20 years, and then there's someone who has 17 years of experience. Are we creating new compression because an individual who has 17 years of experience, based on the record which you have, the scales that you all use, are we intentionally not placing them against a person who has 20 years because we don't want to?
Right, as the current scale exists right now, that would be accurate.
Okay.
Because we are trying to control, making sure that someone coming in, people coming into us are not being placed too much higher than those who've already been here those number of years. So for example, on the current operation scale, that operation document that I'm looking at, a person who has 17 or 18 years of experience is going to be placed on step 15 with us. And then for the most part, once you hit step 15, depending on your number, if you're coming into us with, say 17, 18 years, 19, 20 years, most of them, it's going to take if your years of teaching experience it's going to be, two separate years of teaching experience before you actually would come in on a certain step. But then once you got here, you're now the employee, and you're going to get whatever the board authorizes for the next year. So it is designed as it exists right now so that new people coming in don't far exceed the employees who, a like employee who had already also been here those number of years.
Now, I will say that, I don't know, I have to look at it a little bit more, but that does raise a little bit of a pause, because what happens, because then are we going to be looking at this thing in the same situation 5, 6 years, because somebody who came in now, just because we were trying to, I think the ultimate goal is to get to the one-to-one, right?
Yes.
Is to be competitive, get to one-to-one, people understand that, and that's to deal with your cost of living and so forth.
Right.
But I think that that's two different situations right now. I think right now what we're being presented, based on what I'm understanding, is to deal with those who really we haven't done anything really with. We did it in the budget this year, so year one is already done. So we're only really looking at 2 more years. And then I think in that particular piece, being able to, simultaneously, because I don't think that we ignore anybody, we're also looking at other ways. But at the end of the day, it's about dollars and cents. And I understand that we're saying we got a small window, but a lot of that is dealt with one-time funding. And I think that that's what Mr. Jenkins has consistently, and even with myself, I've said about being, fiscally solvent in the respect that we have to make sure, because all we do is build a budget. It is a final decision with City Council, and great that City Council gave us more money on that. But when we start getting into these larger amounts, we don't know what the climate is. We don't know these other things. At least we have a plan that's here, in my opinion, that can deal with a very large number of our employees. But I do agree in that respect that I would continue to look at what we're doing right now with those individuals who are coming in, and is that going to create something else? But I think that you all have done what we've asked. And that is to find something that we can deal with those who literally have been off the radar, who have stuck with Norfolk Public Schools, who have been in our classrooms, in our cafeterias, on our school buses, everywhere else throughout the division, but who have not been addressing their compression. And so when I look at something like this, it's not perfect, but it is. I don't think anyone should walk away that the board, if they went with this today, that the board is ignoring this. I think this is an actionable plan, and I don't think that there are other things that we can't do. And I think that building the relationship and continuing the conversation along with City Council, who are our funders, to really get them to understand how they can be partners with us so that we can deal with this, I think that's another step. But I appreciate it, and I just want to make sure that
Certainly.
reflects.
And with regards, as your comment on about the operation document, we look at this operation document each year to see if we can continue to move it to help further decompression. So Mr. Jenkins and I have already had a preliminary conversation, and so we likely will be finalizing that conversation to determine what will the operation document for the 22-23 school year look like.
And since I don't want to leave this hanging, can you talk about the rationale about new hires coming in 2 steps below existing employees? So if like you said, if someone has 20 years, you're going to put them in at 17 instead of 20. But can you talk about that rationale since it's been
What
discussed?
happens is, again, because we don't have a one-to-one document in the division that we've ever used here, it's designed such that those Norfolk Public Schools employees who are at the upper end of their steps, we know, based on what we know, which is, again, they missed steps from 2009 to 2016, which is what we've been talking about. So they're not going to be we've never been a one-to-one, and those individuals certainly are not going to be one-to-one. So recognizing that, yes, it is going to contribute to compression, but imagine also not only contributing towards compression more, but the morale then of those employees who've been here, who then see that a person just came here and they had 20 years of experience, and we would have placed them on, if we would have placed them on one-to-one step 20, but a current 20-year employee with Norfolk Public Schools may only be on step 15 or 16. Again, I'm just making an example. So that's why it's designed that way as it is right now. If we were one-to-one, great, but we're not, and we've never been. So at the upper end of the scale, you don't want to highlight and reward somebody who comes here with 20 years the same way as a person who's been here who did not receive that same equitable treatment.
Thank you.
It would be great if it would, but that didn't happen.
I have Ms. Basine and then Dr. Allison.
Dr. Allison would like to go.
Go
since
ahead.
He hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dr.
I just have a quick question about, my colleague Hampton asked about it, but I wasn't sure exactly what it looked like about the reduction funding at risk and early reading programs. What does that look like for us exactly? I'm trying to picture what that means, or what impact, trying to understand what, that reduction, will that impact our programs or our resources or our staff for at-risk and early reading programs? I wasn't totally sure.
It does not. It reduces the money that we receive from the state for these programs, but you'll notice in the budget amendments, there are no adjustments to at-risk programs. So they will continue just as they were budgeted, as they were planned in the fiscal '23 budget. There are no impacts on those services.
Good.
We're using, in effect, the city money to backfill that.
To back that, so we will not feel any impact on that.
Correct.
Very good to hear. And my second goes back to hard-to-staff schools. My colleague Jordan was talking about hard-to-staff schools, bonus, a stipend. Now, with the contingency funds, is that all locked up, or could, like, for example, could contingency funds, some of that go to, if the superintendent felt, or, the administration felt like, yes, we need to put some extra money here for hard-to-staff schools, because we're seeing some issues, that we could create bonuses and stipends for, teachers and staff for those kinds of schools. We do have an opening for that if that becomes a priority with the contingency pot. Does that?
In March, we had asked council to approve an adjustment to the '23 budget for $2.5 million and asked that we be permitted to use those funds for unforeseen circumstances.
Right.
So we had just labeled it as a contingency. This plan uses those funds that the city council approved, but it allocates them to the specific purposes that are outlined in the third slide. Primarily, it's going to the bonus.
And that's 100%?
Nearly. The amount of the reversion was 2.56 million, and my quick math says the local portion is 2,370,000. So there's a couple $100,000 that's used for employee pay, compression. It goes into the other areas. There's a little bit left over from the cost compared to the cost of the bonus. The cost of the bonus is a little less than what the state's providing, plus the amount in the contingency.
Okay, so is there
The bulk of it is going to the bonus.
correct, is there a pot somewhere, if we did, if the administration and it was presented to the board that there is a school or schools that are really having issues in staffing, and that maybe a bonus, a stipend could help with that, is there somewhere that we could redirect funds or talk about possibilities if that became an issue for hard-to-staff schools? Because that's really becoming a big focus as it relates to some schools and also equity that we really need to look at. And I'm just wondering,
it has always been a focus, and we did try that a couple years ago. We do have funding for resources in our schools, but do you have a response to that?
In order to add something to the budget or to spend
Yeah, we
something
have
in a
to take
manner
something out,
different from what we had planned, we would have to reduce the budget elsewhere.
Dr. Birdsong, can you talk about the resources in our schools?
So, just to go back to what Mr. Jenkins just said, if we wanted to fund something outside of what what's already been approved or what we're discussing right now, something else has to come out. We don't have an infinite pot of funds. And so if it's the board's will for us to do that, we'd have to go back and look for an area to cut to fund this. I also want to remind the board, and certainly we are all about equity, and I don't know if Mr. Billups will remember completely, I think a few years back there was some type of evaluation done for hard-to-staff schools and actually paying staff at some locations additional monies or additional funding. And I think the overall results of that evaluation was that it just didn't work. So, you know, I'd like the board to have that discussion if that's what you want us to look at again. Just be aware that we have tried it probably more than once, a few times here
Yes.
in Norfolk. And yeah, and it just didn't make a difference. So we just want to make sure if that's what we're going to do, that it is truly going to make a difference with staffing and retaining, not only just getting people there, but keeping them there. And, you know, I don't know that there are a lot of other factors that have to be considered when you talk about retaining staff,
Yeah, and excuse
outside
me.
of just financial.
Excuse me, Ms. Basine, but it was short-lived. So we looked at 2017, 2018, 2019. We looked at that time, Chesterfield, Jaycox, Lindenwood, PB Young, Ruffner, Southside, STEM. And so it was, in that particular instance, it was short-lived. But if you look at the vacancies that we have now, at least it appears to me that we have vacancies now and turnover now that's higher without the stipend than we had when we had the stipend. And so even if it's something that doesn't come out today, if you know, at every meeting I ask about where are we with our reversion funds, and what the practice has been is that we may get an update for where we are now, maybe in March, but nothing necessarily stops us from designating some of those one-time funds that we're going to have coming out of this year and going to council and asking for the ability to do that, because we know we're going to have some amount.
Yes.
I mean, we've already approved the budget.
We
Now we're looking at the revisions to the budget, the recommended revisions. And if you read the budget, you see that there's a lot of resources that are being put into our schools so that we wouldn't have to go back to that hard to staff. So we wouldn't have hard to staff schools, right? I mean, so that is the ultimate goal here.
Because we're done staffing some of the positions.
Right.
So that we're already feeding those.
Yeah, it's more of a multi-pronged approach that's already in this budget.
But it can be an issue. I mean, because we got to look at we got to look at data coming in now to know what positions are funded at every school. I mean, eventually we'll know that information. And so that it could come up as a point of focus. I mean, it could.
Right, it could. But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is at this time, right now, asking the administration to go back and rework that into
No,
the
I'm not, I was
budget.
not asking that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was not asking to
Okay.
work that, but I did want to bring that point up and the contingency funds and exactly how it connected. So that was more what I was doing,
Okay.
but not for them to go back and redo the budget. Thank you.
Something to start talking about in October when we start the next
Yeah.
budget.
It'll be soon enough. Go ahead, Ms. Basine. Thank you for being so patient.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the dialogue that we're having and appreciate the conversation around the hard to staff. I too, when I see the bonuses, you know, I would like to see some sort of a tiered approach, you know, whether it's now or going forward, that for giving bonuses that, you know, and I like to call it incentivizing for the strategic placement of teachers versus hard to staff, which has, you know, more of a negative connotation. But we cannot, you know, and I've said this, go into another school year with 16, 17 vacancies in a school, in some points, you know, a whole grade level where, you know, or certain subject areas that are, you know, we don't have. And I know we all agree on that. So rounding back to, you know, comments made earlier, I do believe we have this window of opportunity to be aggressive. I do, as Mr. Jordan stated, we have funds that could be applied here. We don't know what's going to happen next year. We don't know what's going to happen the year after that. It is too critical to consider from a morale standpoint, from a student achievement standpoint, from a well-being standpoint, to not have a teacher in front of students. And for that reason, I think we need to balance, you know, fiscal responsibility while ensuring academic success for our students. And so, you know, I am in favor of doing all we can to be more aggressive in this first year. And I understand that, you know, contracts have gone out. I understand all of that, but at the June 1st work session, I believe we talked about also the potential of revising that going forward. And if I misunderstood that, you know, I don't know, but and where would those funds come from? You know, if I too had the question about employee expectations with the $1,000 bonuses, but all I've been hearing for the last, you know, 7, 8 years that I've been on the board, and longer as a community member, is about the step compression and our veteran teachers who have been here day in, day out, you know, serving our students to the best of their ability. And I think they have an expectation that we are going to step up in this moment and do the best we can to correct the compression. So I am in support of that expectation. That is something I expect as well. And so I support, if possible, if the board would support applying those funds towards the decompression effort.
What's those funds?
What's
talking
the
about the 5
bonus
million?
funds? Oh, the bonus to the decompression.
Talking about the one-time ARPA funds?
Yeah,
Is that what you're referring to?
And the funds from the contingency.
The one-time contingency
Right.
fund, okay.
But isn't that already in the bonus, the 5.9?
It's going toward the bonuses, but I'm asking for
So
it
you're just
to
saying
go
for the whole
toward-
5 million, 5,000,009?
Yes.
So, okay, so if I may, Madam Chair, I'm just, so I can understand. One-time ARPA funds, this is a bonus, which means that it's not a salary adjustment, it's a bonus, it's a one-time.
Right.
It's out, we're not responsible for it.
It
But if we
has,
go
it has
and-
no impact on the
no
future.
impact. But if we go and move this out of the bonus, one-time impact, and make it a part of the budget salary, we're now looking at that we have to come up with another $5.9 million from council, right? Because they're our funders. We could request it, but it's not guaranteed right now saying that we are going to get that.
Right, but don't you feel that our teachers are, I mean, I know we all agree, so I'm being
I'm just-
rhetorical in asking that question.
Yeah.
But yes, it's one-time funds, and I get it, and if it was some other resource, I might, you know, I would definitely pause at that, but because of not only do we have the funds, but I'm talking about the moment that we're in when we don't have a teacher shortage. Teachers are just fed up, and the teachers are there. So I feel like we should be doing all that we can to make sure that they are here, that they're working for us, and that we can support them.
So I'll be personally, 5.9 is what we have here today, and it's slated for bonuses. But I also wrote in the notes that y'all aren't looking at sending that out until like later in the fall, right?
We were
December?
looking towards the first, or before the holiday break, or the winter break.
Okay.
And I would also point out that this bonus goes to all employees, every teacher,
Yep.
as opposed to the ones that are compressed. So
Just the ones that are
it hits a
compressed.
bigger
So-
group.
Got it. So if we, and I'm gonna just say this, I'm Ms. Campson, if I can, if we've got some time, because the biggest thing that's contingent upon this for me is whether or not council is gonna ensure that we've got this additional 5.9 in the budget, plus the additional that we're asking for, based on the other compression piece down here. Because we're gonna still be asking for more money,
The
but it's a little
5.9.
bit sooner, right?
The 5.9 is in the budget.
Mhm.
Yes,
I mean, it's already in the budget, but I'm saying that we're gonna make sure that it's in next year's budget as.
Part of the base.
It would be part of the base,
It's
but
part of our operating budget
it becomes a
for
part of our
next year.
operating, but
It's up to
I think that
us,
we have to
right?
have a conversation with our funding partners to ensure
But
that
we have the
that's
budget for it.
gonna be there.
We're making
That
this
they're gonna,
decision.
that they're gonna support that.
Assuming there's not a drop in property values, it would be there.
But isn't that what the
We've
Fed's
seen-
already trying
we've
to do
seen
right
drops.
now?
Well, they're trying to slow spending
Yeah.
because, and cause a slight recession to, yes, to curb inflation.
Just-
If we take the money that we and the state are giving us for the $1,000 bonus, that's what's in our budget now. And then we instead pull that back to go into helping teachers that are in depression. What about all the other people that were supposed to get bonuses that are in that, in the decompression, that they just, we snatch their bonuses away on, would that be what happened?
Well,
I'm misunderstanding.
There would be those people that would receive a bonus if we provided one, that wouldn't if we didn't.
Right, well, that's
Because
what
the
I'm
state
saying.
was funding.
So yes, you can look at it like that.
Take this
Right.
money away from the bonuses, then all those people that are not involved in decompression lose their bonus.
Correct.
And
Well, that's not gonna.
well, I would look at it,
Morale.
Well,
better.
but I see it as the 1,700, or, I'm sorry, it was actually larger than that. That was for the first year. I don't have it in front of me, but the total number of teachers that are actually in that most compressed subgroup make up a good
Taking away
percentage.
from one group of teachers, I mean, I was in that, I never got any money from it, and I would have never expected someone else to give their bonus to me. I went through the whole thing, I was in the district for 40 years, I was long before the 20.
I am just
Yeah, I mean,
hearing
but
a proposal of where the money could come from,
But what
and
I'm saying, it
because,
doesn't seem fair to take it away from one group of teachers.
but I feel like we're
we do that all the
already
time.
taking away from another group of teachers. And I feel like we've been doing that every year. And so, I mean, there's
That's
two
not
ways of looking
fair.
at it, right? I mean, we have new teachers that come on board that are making more money than some of our teachers that have, there's a lot of unfairness in all of this. I mean,
I'm not disagreeing, I'm
yeah,
just saying that I
so-
think morale's gonna be.
All right, so
Anyway.
we could get a consensus. Can you state your recommendation clearly?
I am recommending the 5.09 million that is being applied, that is proposed to be applied toward the bonuses, be applied toward our decompression effort. Is what I'm proposing.
Okay. All those.
Dr. Martin, excuse me, I haven't.
Dr. Gabriel.
Dr. Gabriel,
The voice of God comes in.
We're all looking around going, who's that?
Go ahead,
Who's that?
Dr. Gabriel.
Thank you very much.
A comment about the
Again.
discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you all very much for allowing me to participate via audio. Very good discussion, excellent points discussed from all perspectives. Going back to the root of all of this is that public education is not funded appropriately, period. We do not value our teachers. We do not, the system, as it is right now, does not value the support staff. We have SOQ funding. Norfolk Public Schools funds far more beyond what is the quote-unquote SOQ. We have had multiple discussions as a board with the superintendent about other factors that play into academic outcomes, mental health, athletics, support services, all of that. All of those things Dr. Birdsong took into consideration as she composed this budget, trying to give a little bit to everybody so that way no one entity wasn't being hurt. Attendance technicians, graduation coaches, all of those things super critical so that we meet the mark for accreditation, meet the mark for CTE, meet the mark for other items. And so this is difficult, this is challenging, but at the end of the day, we have to say that the superintendent was given a recommendation to address the issues of those who have been most compressed, and she has come back with a plan. And the plan now went from 4 years to 3 years. And it's not the perfect plan, but it is a plan with actionable items that is completely doable. And it is up to us and every single voter to make their priorities known that we value public education. We need more funds for teachers. We need the support from the state, who is our largest funder, and we need the support from the city, who has already been very generous with this revenue sharing. Obviously, I would always ask for more, but they have fully funded our budget with what we had asked. And so I want to be bold, but I also don't want to be in a situation where we come up a year or two from now and we have to lay off critical employees because we cannot continue the promises that we have made before. And I have experienced that, and I don't want to do that because every person is valuable. So I would say that we support the recommendation of what the superintendent has proposed, knowing that she and the administration are making progress on hearing out what the concerns are with regards to out-of-the-box thinking for what we can do to retain and attract our very valued educators. There is action being done at this moment. We have to move forward with making this decision happen so that way we can continue to move the ball forward.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gabriel.
Dr. Martin?
Yes.
One thing on this, and I have a totally separate question on the budget. Could you just remind me, the bonus we did in the spring, that was $2,500?
That is correct.
So in essence, we took some of our local funding and gave a $2,500 bonus long before this has come up. And so I don't think I think all of us should be proud of that bonus, and there's been other bonuses that we have worked on last year and expanded and tried to do the reach. So I'm supportive of the idea of trying to advance the compression, but I also think it's important that we really know where we are. You know, what Mr. Clanton was saying earlier in terms of the first two phases that we were doing with the Siegel water study, we looked at competitiveness, and in many areas, Norfolk was ahead. We don't know right now as a board where we are in terms of competitiveness. So to me, no matter what we do, we have got to be able to monitor and know where we are, where our employee groups are in terms of competitiveness in the marketplace, and what the impact is of the compression, because I think it's our unfortunate tendency, because of all of the way that systems work, is we find ourselves backed up against the wall at the last minute, and then we will often say, well, we push it down the road. And so I'm supportive of trying to advance it more, but I would like to be able to advance it more and know what the outcome is going to be. So whether we do it with what the current recommendation is, whether we advance it some. I'd like for the board to give some clear direction for the administration to come back and really give us a comparable idea of where our employees are. So as we go into any future discussions, we really know, where we are. And right now, we kind of know, but we don't really know.
When you say where they are, so you talking about the distribution
We should be
chart,
at-
the similar
We should be able to,
distribution chart?
absolutely, where we are,
Yeah.
what
and-
employee groups we've advanced, which ones we aren't advanced, and so forth.
This is the best type of distribution chart that would be able to help us track each year how we're improving our distribution on the scale? How the decompression?
This was scatter plot, we have bar graphs. We can produce, I would like to take the
Some tool.
time to
Okay.
figure out what would be the best way to present the data.
Now,
oh,
separate, I had a separate question on the rest of the budget.
I want to, so we have this on the table right now about where to put the money. Do we put it, do you want to repeat your recommendation?
Well, the proposal was, to use that 5 million, and I'm saying that because we have, as Mr. Jordan just stated, done, quite a bit with bonuses in the past year. But I also want to support having a comparable analysis, because I too have been asking questions about the methodology to ensure that what we're comparing, what the numbers are now, how we've moved since the Siegel Water study, where we are today, and then next year. And I think that's going to be even more critically important in the years ahead as we try to address what every district in the nation is trying to address. But my proposal, back to the proposal, is to use that 5.09 million toward the decompression effort.
And not bonuses.
Correct.
All those in favor
What do you,
of her recommendation?
yes.
Are you in favor of the recommendation to use bonus money
doing a-
toward
are we doing a
decompression?
I think you're
Just
just
doing all those
polling
in
us.
favor,
Right?
say aye. All those opposed, this is just a consensus, this isn't a vote.
You're just polling us where we are.
I think I've been clear, unless we have a conversation and know that, I'm in favor of the respect of continuing a conversation about the potential of using this later with our funding partners. We already have a funding plan. So, no, not right now. I believe that we go ahead and identify it. We're not going to release these funds until, I guess what we said was December. I think that it's important for us to continue the conversation and direct the superintendent and maybe along with the city manager to see about, as we're starting to build the budget for next year, that this $5.9 million, $5.09 million, which is slated right now as one-time funding, that we can have it guaranteed that it will be as the base of what we're building in next year. Unless we have that, I'm concerned that we'll have a shortfall if we have not had that conversation and extended it to our funding partners. All we do is generate a budget. We don't control taxes, and we don't generate the dollars. So my thing is that we just need to continue the conversation. I'm not saying it's a bad idea to continue the conversation and to see if we can get that commitment from council to make sure we have that as the base for next year. Without that, I'm concerned.
Dr. Allison, can you tell us where you stand on this right now?
Yeah, at this point, I'm not in favor
Okay.
of doing that at this time, but I do like the notion of continuing our discussion and looking at what we have this year and kind of looking in the future.
Okay, yeah, so am I. Okay.
And Dr. Gabriel.
Dr. Gabriel?
Dr. Gabriel stated her point.
Okay, now I just want to make sure.
Yeah, she was very clear.
So can I go to my other question that's somewhat related to this, but in a different way? So the one-time funds that were being discussed around the $3 million dealing with schools, where does that fit in this budget? Is that in there? Are we dependent upon $3 million in unexpended funds to support school construction?
The city's fiscal '23 capital budget does include $3 million of fiscal '22 reversion, that's this year, that would be used to fund that capital budget. So, yes.
Okay, so that could have been another 3 million that we could have put into teachers in front of the classroom.
It's 3 million of one-time money.
Yeah, I understand. Yep. And we are projecting, when we have the conversations, because I don't disagree with what Mr. Clanton is saying, but we know we have these reversion funds because in large measure, we have positions and other things on the book that we don't fill. So we could be, we've invested a lot in, central office has grown quite a bit. We've got, I don't know if we still have positions out there like the chief communications position. I don't know if we still have other positions out there that we have not filled, that in terms of a balancing strategy, we could stop carrying some of those things or whatever it is that's resulting in us ending up with these large reversion funds that we're allowing to accumulate and going towards other uses. There may be an opportunity if we went back and scrubbed some things to actually find the resources to provide within our existing allocation support for things like advancing the compensation study. My other question is, are we replacing or renovating Maury High School?
That's a question for the board, and we'll be talking about that, I understand.
Well, I just want to get in what the city has allocated and what we are currently embarking upon. What's the, I think I overheard some discussion about $9 million, whatever. That's going towards what? Designing two options? What are we funding when we're talking about
I think
replace or renovate Maury?
Our plan is for something to be presented to you in August, specifically on that. But
August, September, no later than.
we would need a decision so that the architect knows what they're doing.
Right, but currently, there's money being spent on something?
Not significantly. I mean, there was a study that we planned a couple of years ago, but
Feasibility
we
for
aren't-
Maury?
we aren't spending anything on Maury at the point other than keeping it repaired.
So the money that we're getting to deal with Maury, what is that money going towards?
It's to go to design for either a renovation or a reconstruction. Those funds are available starting next week. July
Those are
1.
capital improvement funds, right?
Right.
Pardon me?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting clarity
Funds in
on.
that general operation.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
And I think that might be, check my chart.
Could I, oh,
You can go ahead.
while Mr. Jordan is, so the other area that, in addition, is going through the budget to see where we could find some money. The other piece is around Virtual Scholars Academy, which, I know plans are already in place for next school year, if I'm not mistaken. And, I'd like to know what the cost of implementing Virtual Scholars Academy is and what the economic and student achievement impact is of that program.
So we've shared with the board that we will be offering that option for our families who desire to continue with their children at home. And within the budget, there wasn't anything additional. It was already built into the budget to have approximately, I don't know offhand, 12 to 15 positions, likely for teaching positions, but everything else we already have in place in terms of the MiFi devices, the Chromebooks, and things of that nature. So it would be the staff to support that would be the biggest budgetary implication for moving that forward.
Okay,
And also the Virtual Virginia piece.
Yes, for the secondary students,
right. And the
which we
the
have
cost
always had in
associated with
place,
that.
right?
And there are costs associated with that.
Yes,
Right.
as always.
Right. So, as a program to look at, especially, looking at, when we get the school-by-school reports, which includes BSA, I'd like to for the board to really look at that and see what kind of impact it's having and whether those resources aren't best spent on our core programs in person, in our school buildings. So that was an area that, I wanted to bring forward as a possible area to examine, if that is the best use of funds at this moment, considering what we have seen academically and through the chronic absenteeism data.
Dr. Martin, I think we've had a lot of discussion around.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask, if we can wrap this up. We're going on 2 hours now. And I know that this is not, this is a special meeting. I appreciate everyone being here. But yeah, I'm ready to draw a conclusion here. So, anyone?
So with that, Dr. Martin, I'd like to put forth that we adopt the recommendations from the administration regarding increased funding available, and as well as the spending recommendations to the fiscal 23 school budget.
Second? Right. Any last minute comments?
But I would like in the record to reflect that I would like the continuation of the conversation regarding this $5.09 million, and to continue that conversation with council to see whether or not we can get a commitment. And if we're able to get a commitment, if we might be able to revisit the budget before we expense those funds out in December.
Just a discussion on the, I think that we need to start with looking within our own means first, before we go and start having conversations with council about assuming that we need more, when at the same time we're going to go back to council and say, oh, we have 10 million, whatever it is, in unspent funds.
Yep.
I think we need to make sure that we've done a good scrubbing of where we are first.
I agree with you on that,
Okay.
Mr. Jordan, and also add that we also continue to look at opportunities where we can trim our budget internally.
Yeah, but I also I am appreciative of the effort. I'm just it just frustrates me some, because I think we had really 4 to 6 weeks where we could have had some of these discussions rather than waiting until June 30th. June 30th came up recently as a result of some counsel that we received. But when we have a budget process, we have to find a way of being able to discuss these items continuously and intentionally. This year, we, at least during my tenure on the board, I think this is probably the least amount of time and effort that the board has given to looking at the budget process in what I think might be the largest budget that we've ever had, or close to it. So these commitments that we make, I want us to follow through on them. If you remember, we said we're going to try to talk about Lindenwood prior to this point. We haven't done that. We've bypassed Southside STEM and some other things, and I agree with some sentiments before. We make these promises, but we don't always follow through on coming back in and revisiting. I'm not knowing the progress. We talk a lot about our accountability systems, and critical to that is knowing where we are, having some targets, and then being able to monitor our progress or lack thereof. And we don't really know where we are in terms of our competitiveness in dealing with salary and compensation, and that's just very disappointing to me. But I
not sure how I'm going to vote on the budget, but I just hope as we move into our next school year that we truly buckle down on being clear about what our expectations are as a budget, priorities, and what we're seeing, and have policies that align with it. Because what I'm observing is that it's almost being assumed that because we allocate funds for something, that therefore we're going to implement that something without necessarily coming back and talking about the policies and other things associated with that something. So like the virtual school. To me, if we were opening a new school, there's a process that we would follow. And I think we should follow that same process with the virtual school. If we are, sometimes we're moving towards one-to-one, sometimes we aren't. I think we need to be clear in our policy what it is that we're trying to achieve, so we don't find ourselves later on with confusion about what the board's goals and directives are. But I appreciate the time, and I do appreciate the effort. I just think we can do better, and I'll encourage us to do so, all of us as a team.
Go ahead.
And I just want to have the opportunity to state, I do appreciate, I think from the work session on June 1st to now, I think we've had probably the most meaningful discussions amongst this board around this budget. However, I too, like Mr. Jordan, have several concerns about, the budget processes that the board was engaged with. And I personally, I feel so strongly about our efforts around compensation that I will not be voting in support of the budget. Although there is a lot of great progress, I think, that is reflected in the budget, I am not there to support it. So I just want to share my perspective on that.
Okay, thank you all. Ms. Tanner, please call the question.
Basine?
Okay.
Campson? Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
Hey.
Rousen?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye. Okay, again, thank you everyone for being here on a Thursday evening and all of the work that I know went into this behind the scenes, and have a good evening.
Thank you.